Okay, good evening. Welcome everyone to the June 2nd, 2020 Union County Public School Board of Education meeting. I would like to ask Chaplain Vic Weaver to do the invocation.
Thank you. Let's pray. Father, we come to you tonight in the name that is above all names, the name of Jesus. And Father, we still have questions as our world is gripped in the uncertainty of the pandemic. Father, give our school board insight and wisdom as they lead our county. We ask you would be with our students, our teachers, our support staff. Father, I ask you to be with our seniors as they seek answers and direction in this very difficult time. And Father, for our nation, I lift up a special prayer for safety as we are gripped in protests and violence. Just give us wisdom and peace as how we should handle this and how we should work together to bring unity in this situation. Be with our first responders and our law enforcement. Father, let us look to you for the answers, knowing that those are the only answers that we need. Father, we ask all this tonight in the mighty name of Jesus and for his sake. Amen.
Thank you very much, Chaplain Weaver. We appreciate you being with us tonight and always. Board, I need to get approval of the agenda.
I have some items to add to the agenda. Under the consent agenda, we need to add closed session bids for Maglock bids, Marvin Elementary chiller bids, Sardis Elementary chiller bids, and server room HVAC bids. We also, that's the consent agenda. We need to add fiscal year 21 budget, just a discussion of or update. And then we also need to add the next meeting in-person discussion.
Okay, so where would you like to put that?
Okay, so the budget thing could come after the bond proposal before the calendar revisions. And I guess the next meeting in person should come just before comments from the board. Are you okay with that?
Before board comments?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you call that?
I call that next meeting in-person discussion.
Okay, got it. So board meetings.
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay, any other changes to the agenda? Okay, I'll accept a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Okay, this passes 9-0. Okay, we did have one person to send in public comments this month. It was George Warwill regarding IB transportation. So that has been provided on board docs to the public for Mr. Worrell, if anyone is interested. That brings us to open session meeting minutes for April 29th and May 5th.
I move that we approve. Oh, sorry. Gary, did you have something?
I was just going to say there's another person, 2C, Shelley Thompson, that submitted.
I didn't see that one.
Oh.
Did that come in late?
I don't have any way of knowing. It's on board docs.
I don't think it was there this morning. That was the one regarding the Wolf calendar.
Yes.
Today.
So if everybody's read it in your email, or
Yes,
would assume that we can forego reading it now.
correct.
Sorry, my battery, it said battery low. So there we go. Okay, so, since I didn't see that, all I had was George Warwill. So we will just acknowledge that there was one other person that sent something in late. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, that was the one that came in today regarding the Wolf School calendar.
Okay, and just to clarify, isn't our board policy 24 hours notice or 24 hours?
It is.
Okay, so thank you very much for putting that one in today. I apologize that I did not have that on my printed agenda. Okay, let's go back to meeting minutes for April 29th and May 5th.
I move that we approve the April 9th and May 5th meeting minutes.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, so both of those pass 9-0, and that brings us to the amended consent agenda.
I move that we approve the amended consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All
Aye.
those opposed? Okay, that passes 9-0. Thank you, board. That brings us to the superintendent's report. Dr. Houlihan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few comments this evening that have been prepared. It is hard to believe that we have come to our last board meeting for the current academic school year. The end of our year certainly looks unfamiliar, but we've made it. I want to say I'm very, very appreciative to our entire team, our staff, our teachers, our principals, our support staff, our board, for all that we have done collectively together for our entire community and for the citizens of Union County. We have learned a lot from our experiences since we were out of school in the middle of March. We are now in a much better position to further serve our families in the future. Parents, we want you to know that we appreciate you. We know this was not easy, especially with regard to remote learning. You are understanding and supportive, and we thank you. As we end this school year, I want to encourage everyone to stay positive and uplifted. We are Team UCPS. That is what we pride ourselves on, and I'm very, very proud of the many, many efforts on behalf of the entire team. Please stay connected throughout the summer, and we will provide very important updates as information is available. I also want to give an update on our 2020 graduations. Our principals and their teams have been working around the clock on logistics and plans to honor our graduates. We do plan to hold graduations during the week of June 22nd. We will have a schedule ready for public by the end of this week. This will include locations and rain dates. Please keep in mind that a few of our schools have construction projects, and we are confirming details before we make a public announcement. We certainly appreciate everyone's patience as we work through all of our guidelines, our audio and live stream planning, and other details to make this a safe, enjoyable experience for our graduates and our families, and we look forward to honoring the class of 2020. Finally, I would like to address the civil unrest that is taking place in our community, our nation, and around the world. These are difficult times, and our nation is in need of healing. It is important for all of us to reflect and think about what we can do to be better. Union County Public Schools stands with other school systems across the country to denounce inequality and inequities. Acts of racism and behaviors that support discrimination have no place in our school system and in our community. We are all human and deserve to be treated as such. As educators, we are the adults that help to shape and guide our students. We should be the examples to teach them to respect each other and our differences, stand with each other, show compassion, and treat each other with the dignity we all deserve. Team UCPS, it will take all of us working together to see change. We have to continue to be advocates for equity and stand up for what's right and just. It is our job to prepare our students for a better tomorrow. Board members, I thank you for your support and leadership. That concludes my report. Thank you.
We could not agree with you more, Dr. Houlihan. Thank you. That brings us to the 2020 bond proposal.
Is that me or is that Mark and Dave?
I don't know. I will turn it
Okay.
over to Mark and Dave, and then
Okay.
Or I can do it too. I didn't
Okay.
know.
Go ahead.
So this is the bond proposal for 2020 that we've talked about. We talked in February with the county commissioners about it. This went through facilities the other day, last week. So we're bringing it to you. It's a lot of the same, it's the same stuff that's been on there. We've talked about it. If anybody has any questions, we would need to recommend, or I'm sorry, the board would need to approve it to send it to the county commissioners. They asked to get it to them as early in June as we could. So if approved by the county, this would go on the ballot in November.
okay.
So it's I can say it out loud, it's $125.5 million. The bulk of it, or the 70% of it, is for a new Forest Hills High School. Money for a East Union designed to repurpose the old Forest Hills High School once the new one is built. It has the design and construct of East Elementary, a land and design for Parkwood High School, a 5 class in addition to Cuthbertson Middle, and for Porter Ridge High and Marvin Ridge High, a field house and a central plant addition. Being some of the two newest schools, they have a central plant that sits in between the middle school and the high school at Porter Ridge Middle and Marvin Ridge, and they want to do some things with that building that's there. So if anybody has any questions for Mark or Dave, they're both here. If I said anything wrong or you guys have stuff to add, please do so. Mark and Dave.
So the amount that you mentioned was 125. It's actually 129,503,270.
I'm sorry, I thought I said 129.5. Sorry.
Okay.
And I think you covered everything pretty well, and we would be glad to take some questions.
Okay, board members, do you have any questions from Mark and Dave or out of the facilities committee? Okay, so we would.
If I could, I'd like to make a comment, or I have
Yes.
a question. I just want to commend staff and the facilities committee. Initially, I had some challenges with getting my head around East Elementary as the first elementary school to replace. And it's been a while since I've been out that way, so Mark and Dave were good enough to give me a personally guided tour, and I now feel the need is justified. This could be a very opportune time for these projects with the economy in a state of challenge, if you will. We might get some hopefully better pricing than if the economy was red hot and we couldn't even get enough people to bid. So I think this is a good time to move these projects forward. As someone who's been around for a while, I can remember the go-go days of the late 1990s and 2000s when we were building schools as fast as we could for the population growth. Now it's time to circle back and replace these older facilities to prepare us for the years ahead. I fully support all of these projects and intend to vote yes today as well as in November.
I appreciate that. I just want to say too, this is the beginning of some of the bond requests that we're going to have, because it's some of the things that we talked about was like the design for repurposing the existing Forest Hills High School for East Union Middle School. So that would be on a subsequent bond. Same thing with Parkwood High School. Our idea is to do some renovations or large expansion or redoing large parts of some of our older high schools, especially Parkwood and Piedmont.
And if I could add, these bonds that are used to finance these projects are 20-year bonds. And projects from the past will start to roll off. So it is very conceivable that this new debt will not be necessarily an additional heavy burden on the taxpayers, but will basically replace retired debt from earlier construction, much in the same way that we replace Chromebooks when leases are up. We start again. Now we're able to circle back on some of these older facilities.
Right, exactly. We need to do stuff on some of these older facilities. Some of our schools are getting up there.
And we do have bond debt that was probably at a much higher rate than is what offered today. So we do have, some of that debt rolling off.
Yep.
So any questions from anyone else, of facilities?
And this does come out of facilities, so it does not second.
Okay. If there are no
I do
more
have a
questions.
question.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep,
Mhm.
I can hear you.
All right. You did a was describing the bond as well as how the
You cut out, so we couldn't hear you.
schools will be structured. Can you still get mine? Is this internet?
Okay, so we've talked about this.
Right.
We've
You
talked about
did a great job with describing. I can't hear you. Can you hear me okay?
You're breaking up a little bit, Candace.
Are you asking what we're going to do to build new schools while there's kids in the existing schools? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm only saying that you did a great job with describing the bond.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'm asking if you post or share a photo. Can you hear me?
Occasionally.
You're breaking up.
Can you share? You did a great job with me that what the schools could potentially look like. Can we also post or share some type of photo with the community as well?
Right. When we get the bond approved, that's when we'll start the design phase for the new schools, and we will share them as they come up. In the past, and I assume Dave and Mark can tell you that will continue, that there'll be a group of parents and students and teachers and administrators at Forest Hills High School who will take part in the design with the architect and try to build something like that. They did charrettes, is that what it's called, last time at Sun Valley, and they let everybody participate, and then those are put up. Yes.
Yeah,
So that
yeah, they did it at Monroe and
Yes.
I believe all of the campuses.
All of the bond projects, correct? Yep.
So if you look at the proposal tonight, next to the dollar figure, it says design, design, design. We will not have any design pictures or ideas to share unless this passes. Because
Right.
we're not gonna retain any architects unless the county commissioners vote and approve it to put it on the ballot. And then if the voters of Union County approve it, only then would we start hiring architects to start, providing us some ideas and something to look at.
Right. And it could be even a year from the time that it gets approved before you would see drawings and things like that, because it takes, month after month of meetings to get those things done. So.
Gotcha.
So we wouldn't spend any money unless this passes through the county commissioners and the ballot.
Correct.
Can you, do we have an estimated timeline? If it's approved in November, you're saying it may take up to a year for the design phase of the new Forest Hills. So it might take a year after the bond referendum passes to actually start moving dirt or looking to move dirt. And then how long could construction of a new high school take conceivably?
So I'll ask Dave to answer that.
Happy to. Yes, what we should be expecting is, number one, we would have to do the architect selection. We would do the design effort. The design effort should be expected to take more than a year, to complete, to then get the required reviews from agencies having jurisdiction, permitting, things like that. So that would take more than a year. Then the construction could easily be 18 months, 20 months from that point. So in all, really, we could be looking at 3 years to walk in the door of a finished Forest Hills High School. Now, that's a new high school. So some of the other projects really wouldn't take that long. The Marvin Ridge and the Porter Ridge, jobs, those would probably have about maybe a 6-month, design time, time for reviews and approvals, and 2 months for bidding and approvals. And that construction period is probably more, in the line of 6 months, 8 months, something along those lines. So it depends on the project, and as far as how long it's going to take.
Dave, could you also address, when these bond referendums are passed, the timeline? You don't just go out the next day and execute and sell all these bonds. They're done in pieces, correct, as projects progress. So it could be up, 3 to 4 years before all these bonds are actually approved and executed.
Yeah, and that's a great point. So we would be working with the county. Typically, we work with the county to look at a funding schedule. And they may have some limitations on their end, which of course we would respect, and that may require us to stagger some of the projects out so that it's not happening all at one time. So that is a dialogue that needs to occur between the school system and the county, and that certainly would affect our schedule. So we would want to have that meeting and find out what kind of limitations there might be before we would develop a bond construction schedule.
I think as part of the package we put together for the county and for the public, it would be very helpful. And I think you sent this out one time, Dave, that you had kind of a schedule of bonds that had been for the earlier construction in the late 90s and 2000s, and approximate retirement dates so that people can see that some of these bonds start to roll off and are paid up. Could you include that in the materials, please? Any kind of presentation to the county?
So certainly that would be a dialogue with Union County Public Schools, our finance folks, and the county's finance folks. So that would be, like I said, a dialogue that needs to happen there to get that information and to put that out. And really the county will have a lot to say about what the impact is going to be on the tax rate and the timing, on that. But certainly that's something that can and would happen before going to the referendum.
Thank you.
So Mark and Dave, the only thing that I would recommend, and maybe you and Kathy have already discussed this, but I do really like the sheet that has been provided to the board tonight. But if you could, on an attached page, just, for Forest Hills, give the age of the school, what year it was built, if there's been any additions or renovations, and, just kind of a very short summary of each project so that they can understand why we're asking for this.
I think we should do a slide deck and send that over.
Yeah.
What we're doing.
Yeah,
I agree with you. Totally.
It's a project justification sheet. It sounds like what you're looking for.
Yes.
I think that would be extremely helpful to go along with this request when you send it over, or when we send it over to the county. So
Yes.
this did come out of facilities. It does not need a second. So all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
those opposed, please say nay. Okay, this will go over to the board unanimous, 9-0. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to the budget.
I just wanted to quickly, and Sean is here, and we're not going to get very deep into this, but the county met yesterday, and the county manager gave them an idea of their budget, and we have some questions we have to ask, and we have questions of our own to ask of them. But basically, what they're talking about is that we would remain flat with the penny value that they had told us, which was about $5 million or $5.5 million less than our actual budget request. So we're going to have some conversations over the next week or two, and we'll go from there. Shauna, do you have anything you want to add to that? I just wanted to update the full board. Nothing? No.
I'm working with the county right now to get answers to a few of the questions that we've already come up with. So I will keep you all updated.
Okay, great. Appreciate it.
So I guess at some point, Mrs. Hightail, what I'm thinking is maybe we have a board work session so that maybe all of us participate in making those decisions as a full board at some date.
And I would assume that's going to come in the next couple weeks, sorry. But yes, I think that would be a great idea, because if we have to change our budget, we're going to have a conversation about what to change.
That's right, because I believe they're voting on this and having a public hearing on June 15th. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we would need to be way ahead of that date to be
Yes.
prepared.
Probably next week sometime.
Okay, so board members, just be on the lookout, because if we're having to cut $5.5 million from the budget, we need everyone's, to participate in that type of discussion. Okay.
Ms. Merrill,
Yes.
more or less a comment, if you will. I am concerned or disappointed the lack of an opportunity board to board to have a dialogue regarding the budget, to directly answer any questions and to offer information to justify our request. Both boards have talked that communication and trust is very important, and I'm disappointed in, and I know, our whole world has been turned upside down, but this is, we're talking about what budget we have to live with for the next year.
Well, no, I want to be clear. They didn't send to us a request that we cut $5 million out of our budget. Shauna can make this clear, but basically we just got the information from last night's meeting, which is where the county manager talked about trying to keep tax rates the same and not increase taxes. So I apologize if I gave that wrong opinion, but they haven't, correct? Shauna asked us to change anything as of right now. So
Well,
it's, go ahead, sorry.
And in all fairness, I may have misspoken too, because our budget request was $5 million above our penny value. So, we have to be cognizant that our request was that. So if the county is looking at trying to maintain our penny value, then our board's going to have to go back to the table, and we'll just decide what we think can or cannot be cut. So that
I think Mrs. McLam will know more in the next couple days, because she's having some conversations about some of the information that was in the presentation last night to the county commissioners. So once we can understand what those questions are and we can get answers to them. But I agree, Mr. Sides, that at some point we may have to have a conversation about it all. But we haven't gotten a specific request from the county commissioners yet.
Yeah, I
Okay.
agree. Having your request cut from a document to document is one thing without having the opportunity to sit face to face.
Well,
With
we could
the
certainly
county.
ask for a joint meeting if that's what you're suggesting.
Well, I would like to see that, and I'm in the past we've been able to do opportunities to have that dialogue, and this through no fault of anyone's, through the special events, we have not been able to do that, and I think that would be important opportunity in person to make our case why we did request this, and for them to understand and answer any potential questions they have directly.
Mrs. Pinetail and I will reach out to Mr. Simpson and Mr. Rape and see if that's a discussion they would like to have, and we'll get back to you. And if there aren't any other comments, we will move on to the 2020-21 calendar revisions.
Ms. Merrill, I'll start with this one if you don't mind.
Absolutely, go for it.
So wanted to first of all thank our board for there are several changes to the calendar for next year that are required by state law. The General Assembly recently approved a new legislation that requires all schools to have a start date that begins August 17th. They've also required 5 additional days be added to the calendar, as well as 5 additional days for remote learning. They also defined year-round schools to mean that a year-round school must be 45 days in session, followed by 15 days off of session, and then that cycle repeats. And so because of these changes, we have been trying to research what to do for our calendar next year. We took a few proposals to the SPTT committee last week. During that conversation, it was asked of staff to go back and research the possibilities of beginning our school year next year with ending the first semester before the winter break and ending the second semester before Memorial Day. Our staff has researched that. We have proposed a new version for the board this evening, as well as the version for UCEC and Wolf School. I want to thank our calendar committee. Ms. Heintel served on that as a member from the board. And I want to say a big thank you to the calendar committee who have met and given feedback on multiple times, as well as to our staff for their due diligence and completing what the SPTT committee asked of them. So we bring forth some recommendations tonight for discussion and hopefully approval so that we can get our revised calendars in place. I also, and finally, want to say there are a lot of questions right now about the RNC, and I just want the public to be reminded our board a few months ago already approved a calendar that would start the week of August 30th. And looking at the week of August 24th, our calendar reflects the possibility of the RNC being in session. That impacts Mecklenburg County, Cabarrus County, and Union County. And if the RNC does not meet in Charlotte, then we would have to come back to the board with a revision on where we would put remote learning days. Because as it currently stands, that week of the 24th would all be remote learning. And so I just wanted to give the board and the public a brief kind of summary as to how we got here, so that it is very clear where we have flexibility and where we do not. So I know that Shauna and Tom Bulla are on the call to help answer questions. So I'll turn it over to the board for dialogue and discussion.
So I have a question. I was on the calendar committee and this came up from a couple of members of the committees. So I think that in general, I've heard from people and calendar committee people that they liked calendar C, which is getting the first semester in before winter break, and then second semester ends just before the Memorial Day weekend. So we've been asking for calendar flexibility from the state legislature for a long time. So this gives us the opportunity to do that. I think we tried to keep the dates the same as what we had for 2021 is the long weekends and things like that. But I have a couple questions. The first question is, I don't love the December 21st kind of sore thumb sticking out. And I know we're trying to get a certain number of days into the first semester, but if the RNC doesn't stay in Charlotte and we get the remote learning opportunities back, I would like to see the 21st become a remote learning day, because it's kind of stuck there. So there's that. The other one, and I know this doesn't seem like a big deal, but a couple members of the committee reached out. On the calendar that we approved last December, March 2021 had a half day on the 4th and a full day on the 5th, and we moved it forward a week. And I would prefer to go back to the 4th and the 5th, because we don't have, last break that we have is in January, no break in February. And if we could push that up to the first week of March, then it would be 3 weeks before spring break hits instead of just 2. And it would only be 6 weeks without a break instead of 7. Unless there's some I was waiting to see if there was anything on there that there was a 6-week ending date then, or a 9-week, but there's not. So is there any reason we couldn't move that 3.5-day weekend in March up a week?
No, ma'am. That would make no substantial difference to the calendar as it stands with regards to required days and number of teacher days and number of students.
That would be great, because that's what the original calendar committee had. So at least we could go back to some of the stuff that we originally had. And I had the question about the 4th of January. So in case anybody else has a question I had about the 4th of January, is that high schools switch over semesters on that day, and that's why it's a teacher work day. So those were my big things that I had on this. The other thing is, if we have remote learning days, will those also be an opportunity for the teachers to telework, or is that just during the school year? Will the state allow that? Will the state not allow it? Optional work days, the same thing. Will be teleworking opportunities as well?
I'll answer twofold. One, I don't know about the state allowing or not allowing. I don't know if they've weighed in on that. That would have to be something I would have to ask Ms. Morris and others to look into. What I will say is that I agree with flexibility. And if we have remote learning days for a remote learning or an optional teacher workday, since we have teleworking guidelines in place, if that's allowable, I certainly do not object to that. And so I think that we would just have to verify the approval of that and the allowance of that. I've not seen anything that says we can't allow that.
I haven't either, but I haven't either. So I appreciate that. But I have to say that I really like Calendar C, and I've heard a lot of good stuff about Calendar C. So I'm hoping that we will tackle that. But I also know that there's a calendar for Union County Early College, and some people get mixed up on it. That's the one that starts earlier because of the SPCC one. And then we also have the Wolf calendar, which I believe Ms. Merrill's going to talk about, which is our only year-round calendar right now. So
I have a quick question about Calendar C, and I have to agree. I like this calendar very much for the traditional schools. The only question I have is, would exams happen before Christmas or after Christmas?
They're before Christmas. So to give you an example, they would be, and I'm sorry if I'm butting in, Dr. Bulla. I asked the question last week. They would be the 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th of December, with the 21st being the makeup day.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay, and then the same
That
thing
might need to be added somewhere on the calendar.
I asked the question. I apologize. I should have said that I asked that question. And the same thing in May. So it's the last week of May.
The 24th or the 17th?
The 24th of May, the 25th, 26th, 27th, and the makeup day is on the last day of school, correct, Dr.
Gotcha.
Bullock?
That is correct.
I appreciate that. He provided that to me. I should have sent you guys that.
I would add that somewhere under the secondary grading period. I don't know, add some kind of exam dates somewhere on this document.
And the other thing I wanted to ask Dr. Houlihan and Dr. Bulla or Shauna, whoever it is can answer it. What did our principals think about calendar C?
I wasn't at that meeting. Dr. Bullock can comment. It is my understanding in talking with staff that principals, at least high school principals, were consulted on this. The overwhelming majority supported this without a doubt. And Dr. Bullock, you can make further comment on that.
That is correct, Dr. Houlihan. The only thing to add is the middle school principals as well. Both are very well aware of the testing implications and the implications of the current calendar with testing prior to winter break and prior to Memorial Day. So yes, and no adverse issues with scheduling and those kind of things. So.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, I really like this calendar.
I like it a lot.
So I do want to talk about the Wolf calendar.
Wait, can I go back? So can we move the 4th and 5th can we move the March date back to the 4th and 5th? Does anybody on the board have a problem with moving that back to where it was? Okay, good.
That's a very good idea.
Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Thank you.
Well, did we ask the parents as well? Did we survey the parents?
We did not do another survey. I put this out on Facebook just to see, because when I'm on the calendar committee, they said that you can ask people what they think. And a couple of the calendar committee people said, well, why did they move the March date? Because that's the date that we had the whole time. So that's why I'm suggesting that we leave it the way the calendar has been since last December when we approve it for that date.
And just to clarify, Mrs. Sturdivant, the calendar committee is made up of employees, parents, students, a board member, principals. So parents are on that committee.
Yes, very much so.
I have one quick question.
Yes.
The additional instructional days, teachers are still working the same amount of days as they normally would, correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct. 215 days is the teacher work. So there are no more teacher work days that they won't be working more.
Okay.
That was a confusion for because people were thinking, as teachers were thinking that they had more days that they weren't. So thank you. That's a good question.
I just wanted clarification on that. Thank you.
Okay. That's all I had, Ms. Merrill.
Okay, so if it's okay with the board, I'd like to open up a discussion about the Wolf calendar. That is currently the only school that we have that operates on a year-round academic calendar. And we have received a tremendous amount of emails from parents because of the North Carolina Bill 704 that has changed this from 45 days in school and then 15 days off. Traditionally, Wolf students are out on 2 weeks at a time, and parents are able to manage their students being home for 10 days. But now with this calendar coming out of legislation, the students would be home for 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks. And parents are starting to recognize that that this would be extremely difficult for them to manage, and their students would be further set back another whole week. And so I'm just going to put this out there. I have heard from Christy Guittard, Kelly Higgins, Shelley Thompson, other families, the Hopper family, Metzenmacher, Miatudila, I apologize, Roberts, Singh, Hedgepeth, Emerson, Oakley, and the Louder family. And they were even sweet enough to send pictures of their students from Wolf, which if you got them, I'm sure it melted your heart too, to see those students. So it's like, thank you for your email. It brightened my day. I hope it did yours too. But these parents, that is a significant burden for them to have their students home for 3 weeks at a time. And so they have petitioned our board to consider just for this year some type of waiver or waiver so that they too can have a late start or an August start and follow our traditional calendar just this year, rather than rushing their students with, underlying health conditions and other concerns back into the building under one roof in July. And if we could allow Wolf to follow our traditional dates just this 1 year, that would give those families enough time to petition Raleigh and our state representatives to reconsider Bill 704, for this group of students.
Question.
Mhm.
Has anyone reached out to Mr. Deming, who's the principal there, and got his feedback about the calendar that's being proposed? What does he think will be best for his students?
I have spoken to Mr. Deming. Thank you, Ms. Helms, for that. I'll bring a few points that I've heard from him. Number one, he has talked with his staff about these proposals as well. As best as my understanding, our bottom line is our teachers and staff will do whatever we call upon them to do. They're wonderful people. However, there's a contingency that is all for traditional. There's a contingency that wants to keep the year round, and then there's a contingency that either one is fine with them. I think that there are 3 primary questions that we have, right? One right now is making the switch from a year-round to a traditional. We've done that in the past with other schools that the board has voted on. Whenever we do that, we do have to work with employees with regard to payroll, because there are some payroll changes that our finance staff has to make in order to catch them up on the payroll cycle. That's one concern that Mr. Deming and I talked about that we can work through. The second one is that he has consulted with parents. He has not been able to get feedback from all of his parents. He's been able to get feedback from about half of his parents that feel that the move to a traditional calendar would be necessary for 1 year. But he has not had the ability to engage with all parents. And that was a concern I think that he had. And then third, there is in a year-round calendar like we've known it, we haven't ever had the need for extended school year services through EC. He did talk to me a little bit about, that might be a concern, that offering compensatory educational services in extended school year in the summer, they've never had to offer that, and that might be something we need to take a look at. And then I said 3, I meant 4. And then the fourth one is if we move them to a traditional calendar, how likely would it be for them to move to a year-round the following year? My position on that is we have to make these decisions 1 year at a time. We all know we have no idea how to predict the future, and we have no idea what's going to happen, between now and next year. And so I would say I understand what our parents are asking. As a superintendent, I can't say right now that we will guarantee that if you go to a traditional calendar this year, that you automatically get to go back to a year-round. That the following year, that would have to be brought back to the board, and the board would have to discuss that and approve that. So I think Mr. Deming is, those were his concerns or questions, I think many of which we could work through. But I do feel like, or I wonder if we might should take some more time to get some additional stakeholder input. But Mr. Deming said whatever we decide, they're going to obviously do their best to make it happen.
I guess that I like what the wording that Melissa had, which was a waiver. It's not, we're not going to go back to
permanent.
Right. We're not going to be permanent. We're not going to go to a traditional thing and then have to go back. It's COVID-19. We're keeping the kids safe, and it would just allow us to do that for the year because of what's going on.
The
I
only
just
thing
don't
is
know
we
how
don't-
comfortable I feel sending that entire staff and that student body with underlying, compromised health situations back into the building on July, what is it, July 20th? But I think the other big concern is them being at home for 3 weeks at a time and parents not having accommodations for their special needs for 3 straight weeks as opposed to 2.
And I think all of those are valid concerns. I do share the sentiment of our students at Wolf School going back July 20th. As we talked to SPTT, if we did that, I would recommend that staff put in a waiver to DPI to possibly have remote learning beginning July 20th, because the other part of the legislation says that you cannot start school with remote learning. And given that as of today, I don't have guidelines from DHHS or the state on how we're going to reopen. We're all still working through that. As a superintendent, I do share concerns about the face-to-face environment with that for our students beginning July 20th. And so that was my comment, that if the board wanted to keep them on the current schedule, we would have to apply for a remote learning waiver if we had to begin the year with that at Wolf School. But I do think, Ms. Merrill, your concerns are valid.
So if we applied for a waiver from DPI to allow them to go 1 year as a traditional school, how long would it take for the waiver to be approved from DPI? Do we have a timeline for that? How quick can we get turn around on it?
I don't think the waiver is necessary. I believe the board has every right to determine which schools go on which calendar. We don't need a waiver for the board to make a decision on them going to a more kind of a schedule that begins August 17th. The only waiver that we would need, in my opinion, is a waiver for remote learning to begin on July 20th. All other waivers, you don't need to submit one. So the board has the authority to make this change if they want to.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up.
So if we put Wolf School on the traditional calendar just for this calendar year, then we would not need to request a remote learning waiver.
That is correct.
Okay.
Could I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Houlihan, in your estimation, when is it time critical that we make, is it critical we make a decision tonight on this? How much time is staff going to need if we decide to go to the traditional calendar, at least for this year? How much lead time do you feel comfortable that they're going to need to put this in place?
I think our parents need to know, and they want to know. A lot of our families all of us are making plans. I think if the board wanted us to go back and kind of revisit this with all parents to get their perspective on this situation, I would contend that we would need to do that during the next couple of weeks and then work with the board on maybe an end of June meeting if necessary. But I think we need to make that decision prior to July 1. That's just
and I just want to throw food for thought out. I doubt that Mr. Deming only reached out to 50% of his parents. I would assume that Mr. Deming reached out to all of his parents and only heard back from 50%. So, with that clarification, it's kind of one of those things, don't complain if you don't vote.
How about if I do it this way? I will, for the sake of moving things along, I will be glad to offer a motion that at least for this next calendar year, we transition the Wolf School to a traditional calendar. I will offer that motion.
I'll second it.
Second. Oh, you got it, Christina.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments now that we have a second? Or anything you want to ask staff?
The other parents.
We feel that Mr. Denning has reached out to the other parents, and it doesn't seem like they have.
We've had conversation as a board. We've had more dialogue. I think the other parents would probably appreciate this conversation, and maybe they would respond to a second survey.
I don't think we have the time.
We just did a
That's what
motion.
Mr. Deming tried to do.
Move forward.
Yeah, I think Mr. Deming attempted to reach out and couldn't get in touch with them. And we're at the beginning of June, and they're scheduled to go back in July. So our time crunch is we're really constrained right now. So tonight would be the best
Understand.
parents to go ahead and make a decision tonight so that they can plan accordingly.
And payroll.
Appreciate more.
Time to.
Wait, what?
I said, I think they would appreciate more if they could go ahead and make some plans, like we said, and adjust to the new schedule. I mean, we are running out of time completely on this.
I totally agree. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, in other districts or in Union County Public Schools history, has Wolf always been a year-round school, or has it ever followed a traditional calendar? And Michelle, can you shed any light? Is there any particular reason why Wolf needs to be on a year-round calendar? Is it the academics or the services they're being provided?
In my tenure with the county, which is 11 and a half years now, it's always been a year-round school. I don't know how long prior to that it was year-round. One of the benefits of a year-round school for students with this level needs is that they're getting services pretty consistently throughout the school year. They have more breaks, but they're short, they're shorter than the summer, and it just keeps facilitating learning and services throughout the year.
So I think that's why, the motion needs to be for only 2020-21, because, we are coming off of COVID-19. We don't know if this virus is going to peak back up in the fall, and hopefully it will not, but I think this would just be a one-time request.
I would agree. And let me also add that although Wolf has been on a year-round calendar, it hasn't been on the type of calendar that's now proposed, since the state has defined or redefined year-round. They've changed it from the 2-week break to the 3-week. So we're actually saying, okay, we can't have the year-round that has worked so well for us in the past. So we feel it's best to drop back to the traditional rather than accept the new guidelines of the year round. And it's just for this year. We don't know, the legislation may change during the year for the, what would that be, 21-22 school year. So we can go back to a revised year round. But for this year, this seems to be better than, in my opinion, and from the feedback I'm getting, it's better to go to a traditional versus accept the new format for year round.
I agree. I totally agree.
I agree also.
Okay, are there any more questions? Because we have a motion and a second. If there aren't any more questions, I will call the vote.
Ms. Merrill, I do have one question.
Okay.
Could I just get clarity from staff? So how did Wolf transition during the COVID pandemic? Well, like, what does remote learning look like for that school right now? Can we just get some clarity on that?
Yeah, I mean, in talking with Mr. Deming, there, it obviously, first of all, in any situation, remote learning presents challenges. We all know that. Secondly, Mr. Deming and I have talked about that extensively, and he has commented that while they've had challenges, he has also had many successes. I think that it's requiring a lot of one-on-one attention, a lot of work with parents, probably more so than in a different kind of school. They've had high degrees of success in some cases, and in others they have not. And they've been working through those with our EC staff. So I wouldn't say that across the board it has been an overarching, 100% of the time in terms of engagement and participation. But he has said that his staff has worked tremendously hard with parents and students. to continue remote learning to the best of their ability. And he, as a principal, has been pleased. On the flip side, he shares some challenges as well. Providing some services that we have to provide are very challenging in that kind of environment. So it's about it's a good balance of successes and challenges, I think.
Thank you. And just so everybody is clear, the move to a traditional calendar for this year only, and then moving back to a year-round calendar next year provides that short break again. So when we're saying convert to a traditional calendar for this year only, we're not talking about necessarily a full summer if we adopt back to a year-round.
That is my understanding. And now I will remind the board also, the other part of the legislation requires a certain number of days to pass after the last day of school and the first day of school beginning. So we have to make sure that we count those number of days. And we'll continue to get feedback from Wolf parents and teachers about this change because we don't know. They may come back and say that the traditional calendar that we've been working on has actually proven to be a success, and we like that better. So that's why I say we make these decisions 1 year at a time, and we will document lessons learned and feedback along the way and come back to you all with any of those lessons that we've learned and feedback before we automatically guarantee that you're moving back to a year-round the following year. There's just a lot that we need to go through before I believe we can make that assertion.
And I think, from all the emails that I read from, the 12 parents that have written in or petitioned for this request, the one concern I will have is, these students are used to having, 10-day breaks, and moving to a traditional calendar, they will not be getting those 10-day breaks. So, I hope this works for those families and doesn't, put too much pressure or stress on our most vulnerable students.
Well, with that being said, since we've been out since March from school, it's going to be a hard adjustment for all students those first couple months to go back, especially our Wolf kids. So, our teachers, we're going to have to implore them to have extra patience and understanding during these times, especially the first couple of months of getting back into the routine. That's not just for our Wolf kids, but for all of our students, because again, they've been out since March. We're not going back until August. That's a long time to be not in a seat in a classroom. Right. So I think that's across the board. I don't think that's exclusive to Wolf.
And I agree with that, but the Wolf students are used to having the 2-week break. So it may be a huge adjustment, with the challenges that they face and the therapies and everything that they're going through, not to have, that 10-day break. That'll be a big change. But you're right, all of our students are going to be going through a lot of transitions back to the classroom.
And on the flip side of your point, Ms. Merrill, that means that the students will have a much longer or a summer break. And as you mentioned, Dr. Houlihan, we're going to have to make some kind of provision for interim summer services to be available if we find out this is the best schedule to maintain.
And the only question I have before we vote is, I don't know if Drew or Michelle are very familiar with North Carolina Bill 704. I mean, did they address, Wolf schools or, children with special needs, or was this just a year-round blanket bill for all year-round schools? Did they address special needs students?
Michelle can comment. It's not my understanding that they addressed specific situations or specific students with disabilities. It was clearly a year-round defining or definition. That was the legislation where they, for the first time, defined what a year-round school is. And Michelle, if I'm wrong about that, you can let me know, but I believe that was just what that bill was about.
Okay.
Yeah, and the year-round school is defined by the 15 days off
45 days.
And the 45 days is not the only definition of year-round school in the bill. It's just the only one that applies to our Wolf school. And that's why I think there was 3 options, and Tom or Shauna can correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the one that was most applicable. And I don't know of anything that dealt specifically with high need.
So I think from a Union County Public Schools point of view, elected officials here tonight, I think we should help. You know, the number one thing that I gathered from the emails is that by these parents having not starting in July and being able to start like the rest of our students August 17th, this will give them more time to petition our elected officials in Raleigh to clarify this bill. And I'll just put out there to our superintendent and our elected officials that we support our parents, our Wolf parents, that we help them clarify this bill in Raleigh.
Yeah, I agree. And we might want to look at providing some feedback with regards to specialized settings and specialized schools and the impact of a year-round calendar that can have. That would be something that I'm perfectly capable of having those discussions. I would welcome that conversation, because these are some one-off situations that are very unique. I just want to again say, we've made these transitions in the past with moving schools from year-round to more of a traditional. When we do that, our finance staff will have to work with employees, just like we've done in the past, on their payroll. That is going to have to be something that will have to be adjusted because of the number of pay periods they've been used to. We will work with all of our teachers and staff to be to give them choices on how that would happen. That is something we've done with other school settings, and the same would be applied here. And so I just want to make sure that we all know that will be another impact. We'll work through it, but it is something that I want to make sure our teachers and staff know will be a change that will be coming.
So just out of curiosity, since we're not formally converting Wolf to a year-round school, is there any way to keep our employees on their current pay schedule, since we're not making this a permanent change right now?
I think because it's a change that will impact the next fiscal year, that's really all that we have to look at right now, is how that will be accommodated. Ms. McLam, you can comment on the far better on the details than I can, but because it will be a new calendar year and a new fiscal year, that's why we would have to make those changes. And I may be wrong about that, but.
Initially, it comes into when you have staff come back to work. And right now they're used to getting a July paycheck because they come back to work in July, and they wouldn't be coming back till August. So that's where the challenge is. We would have to work through making sure that they have consistent pay to not impact them adversely. And then how do we reconcile that out when we get to the end of the year? Because we can only pay them for a certain number of days. So we will have to work with them to make that work.
Okay.
Like I said, we've done this in a number of other schools. I mean, we have no problem making those accommodations, but it will be different. And I just want to make sure that they understand that.
Right. Okay, board, we have a motion and a second. Is everyone ready to vote, or? Okay. So all those in favor of the motion of allowing Wolf School to work on the traditional calendar just for 2020-21 say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed,
Aye.
all those opposed say nay. Okay, I'm going to record this as a 9-0 vote. Okay, thank you, board members.
I'd like to make a motion to approve calendar C as the traditional school calendar for 2021, and the the early college calendar as well, with the one change to the calendar C, which was moving the 3.5-day weekend in March up to the 4th and 5th.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. We will record that as a 9-0 vote. Okay. That brings us to policies for review. I'll turn it over to Michelle Morris.
Good evening again, board members. You currently have 5 policies for review before you. These are essentially part of our regular review of policies. If you have any questions on any of them, I'm available to answer.
Okay. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to board members having our next meetings in person. I'll turn it over to Mrs. Heintel.
Yes, I just wanted to have a conversation with the board about whether or not we're ready to begin in-person board meetings come July, which is the next fiscal year. Mrs. Helms, I see you. You know, if anybody's not comfortable with that, we can still, those people can still use Zoom and things like that. But I guess if we're going to be getting ready for school, I kind of wanted to throw it out there to do in-person meetings again.
Is there any way we can do it sooner?
I know, right?
We have a meeting again at the end of the month. Can we do that one as well? Because as appreciative as I am that we have these able to do a Zoom meeting, these are really hard. These are really hard to do.
I don't think people understand exactly how hard it is, because sometimes you can't see who's speaking. You can't get, it's hard.
So, Mrs. Hams, if I understood your comments, you would say that our June committee meetings, the end of the month, we would consider for in-person?
Well, not necessarily that, but if we, I know at one point in time, I thought we discussed having another meeting.
A work session?
Yes, and do that one together. Unfortunately, I have to call into my meetings because I have to work. So, you know, that will still continue for me. But the full board meetings, I would like to have in person again, as soon as we need to have another full board meeting together.
And again, if anyone's uncomfortable with that, we can still do that, you know, make accommodations for that. That's not a big deal.
I think this is such an important conversation. I think all board members should speak up.
I think we should meet in person from now on. I'll be glad as chair of curriculum committee. If we have a meeting at the end of this month, I will be glad to offer that be an in-person meeting as well.
But I'd also like to add the caveat that if our staff is uncomfortable, that they should be allowed to Zoom, because, you know, their safety, their mental stability is very, very important to us. So if they are not comfortable coming in and meeting in person, if they have underlying health issues or they take care of someone that has underlying health issues, I completely understand and don't want to hold them still caring for other people or themselves. So if our staff needs to do that for their own well-being, then by all means, we should accommodate staff as well, not as just board members.
And just
I agree. Should not be
as a
mandatory.
public reference, we held a hearing, socially distanced at the PDC just last week, and I've heard that it went very smoothly. So we know it can be done. But again, if there's any staff member with an underlying health issue or caring for their parents or someone with a health issue, we would absolutely accommodate a board member or staff to join us via Zoom. Any other board comments? Okay. Mrs. Heintel, do you want that to be an action item or just discussion?
I guess we would probably vote on it. That's fine.
Okay. The board chair cannot make a motion.
I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that. I move that we move back into in-person meetings except for staff or board members who aren't comfortable with that because they're taking care of parents or family members, or they have underlying health conditions or whatever reason. I'm good with.
I will second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Thank you.
I'm going to record this as a 9-0 vote. Okay, and that brings us to board comments.
I have a couple of questions
Mhm.
that I'd like addressed. Since we've been going through remote learning, I've had a lot of feedback from parents stating that how difficult it's been for them and their child to do remote learning. So what I would like staff to, I guess, entertain me, if you will, is to have some of the teachers' professional development work with our virtual teachers, how to make it more seamless, how to help them out, how to help our kids to engage more via internet, etc. Because some of them really struggled. Now, some of them were complete rock stars, and they should be recognized for doing that. However, it seemed like the vast majority of the feedback that I've received, it was a struggle to get these kids on board and getting the teachers on board and how to get them engaged, get their students engaged on how to get involved during remote learning. And if we're required to do that, I think that's something that our virtual teachers, if they could, help our classroom teachers with. Also, a parent reached out to me, and this seems like a very valid concern, is when we go back to school on August 17th, some parents are concerned because their child is in a traditional classroom. They're not in an EC classroom, but the child or their parents have underlying health issues. Are we making an option for those students who are in those situations to do online classes, do virtual learning? What accommodations are we making for those parents that aren't comfortable sending their kids back in August?
So I can try to answer both questions if you will allow me. One, on the remote learning, the General Assembly has a new requirement that all school systems must submit a remote learning plan that would take effect for next year. That is due at the end of July. And so we have it's a 15-part plan. There's 15 criteria that all school systems have to be part of their plan. One of that would be professional development for teachers and staff. And we've already talked about our summer PD plan and exactly what you pointed to in terms of helping teachers understand kind of the differences between remote learning and face-to-face instruction. That will be part of that remote learning plan for sure. And we will be prepared to bring that to a curriculum committee as soon as that is done, so that the committee has the ability to take a look at that and approve it. So I hope that will answer that part of it, because we do know that all of this happened at once. I don't think anyone was really prepared, but I will say that I'm proud of our staff for the work that they've done. We've learned a lot of lessons, and we'll apply those lessons to our remote learning plan, and again bring that to the curriculum committee. So that will be something that we will do for sure. So can I clarify anything on that, Ms. Helms or board, on that question? Okay.
That was great. If you could address the remote learning for students.
So the second piece on that, I do share concerns about students not returning because of fear of safety, of health, both that they may share or parents may share. Our team is currently exploring the ideas of having either a school within a school or a virtual component to give that flexibility. It's my understanding that we have the ability to do that. We're just exploring potential barriers and ways that we might want to structure that so that there is no cost to the district, so that, ideally we'd love to have families stay with us and stay enrolled with us, but in a virtual way, as well as staying connected to a local school. Right now at the high school level, we have Union County Virtual, We also have the North Carolina virtual public school, but we do not have a virtual school for elementary and middle. And that is
was
something.
my concern.
And that is something that our staff is working on as possibly proposals for the board for consideration in the future. But we are not prepared to speak to the details of that because that's taking a lot of work to figure out if and how we can make that happen. But we do recognize that as a concern, and that is something that we are working on.
Okay. I'd also like to make a couple comments, Ms. Merrill, is I'd like to congratulate Dr. Houlihan for being published recently. Congratulations to him. But let me be the first one to shout out to our 2020 seniors. We're so proud of every one of you. Congratulations. If this has not taught you anything, it's taught you perseverance and endurance, and you can make it through almost any situation if you've made it through this. So congratulations. Please be safe over the summer months in whatever your endeavors, if they're going further in your education into college, if you're going into the workforce, if you're going into the military. We're all very proud of all of our seniors, and we congratulate each one of you. And we look forward to seeing you at graduation at the end of June. And we hope it all goes very seamlessly. And we are just so proud of y'all. Congratulations.
I second that, Ms. Helms. I too would like to congratulate the class of 2020. I have one here in the Merrill household who is very excited about graduation. And I have had and I'm sure all board members have had the excited emails and messages from parents across Union County, extremely excited that after 13 years of hard work, their student is going to have closure after losing half of their senior year and their sports and their dances and proms and signing day, that Union County Public School is giving their student closure with a proper graduation. So I want to thank all of our principals and staff members who are working to plan a very special, safe and socially distanced ceremonies for our seniors. And again, just like Mrs. Helms, we are so very proud of the 2020 seniors this year. We recognize that many of you came into the world during the 9/11 crisis. I know mine did. And so you're a unique class on your arrival, and you're going to be a very special and always remembered class of 2020. And we love each of you, and we're so proud of you on how you have handled losing half of your senior year. And Union County Public Schools looks forward to sending you off into the future with a proper graduation and a diploma and a transcript. So I will end that and turn it over to other board comments. Okay, hearing none, are there any announcements?
Yeah, I have one. The Strategic Planning, Information Technology and Transportation Committee is scheduled to meet June 24th. That's a Wednesday at 7:30 in person at the PDC.
Then I will speak up and say that policy most likely follows SPIT on June 24th at 9 a.m.
And if needed, curriculum will follow the next day, June 25th, which is a Thursday at 9 a.m. in person.
The Facilities Committee will meet on June 18th, and we're still talking about the Finance Committee meeting. Once we hear from the commissioners, we'll schedule that. So thank you. And I echo everybody said about the class of 2020. Congratulations, and to all our students, we made it to the end of
Our teachers, right?
And our teachers, our staff, everybody. I know that the last few months have been hard. So I appreciate that we're almost there.
This doggone COVID virus has actually made me become a fan of Twitter, and has introduced me to a lot of our teachers and leaders across this county that I would not have otherwise gotten to see all the tremendous gifts and talents that we have in Union County. So yeah, our teachers are rock stars, our students are rock stars, and I think it's safe to say we're surviving. We did it. We survived. And board members, since we don't have a date, once we hear back from the county, just make sure you're paying attention to your emails when we schedule that in-person work session too. Okay, and again, all of those dates and times, we're going to shoot for in person. And then, you know, anyone who's caring for someone, you know, or needs to participate via Zoom, we'll do that as well. If there are no other announcements, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much, board members. You're
Good
rock
job.
stars too.